He didn't raise his voice, didn't drop his name, just stood there calmly while they made what might be the biggest mistake of their careers. So make sure you subscribe and comment where you're watching from, because this story takes a turn no one saw coming. It started when Clint Eastwood walked into the airport with nothing but a carry-on bag and his old leather jacket, no bodyguards, no entourage, no VIP treatment. Just a legend moving through the world the same way he always had, quiet, focused, and without needing to prove anything to anyone. But that day, something was different. To one TSA officer at the checkpoint, Clint didn't look like a film icon, he looked like a potential issue. A young officer spotted him, eyes sharp with suspicion, and muttered something into her radio while keeping him in sight. Moments later, another officer approached. "Excuse me, sir, we need you to step aside." Clint didn't argue, didn't even flinch, he just nodded and followed, no fuss. But this wasn't your average security check. The mood changed quickly. The officer asked for ID. Clint handed it over. It clearly read Clinton Eastwood Jr. Still, there was no recognition, no pause, just more rigid commands. Take off the jacket. Step over here. Don't touch your bag until we say so. Clint complied without question, and somehow, that calm attitude only made them more suspicious. "You're not answering fast enough. You're acting evasive," one officer snapped. Then came the final blow. "You need to comply, or you'll be escorted out." Clint looked at him, steady and cool, and said, "You're doing your job. I get it." But that quiet confidence must have hit a nerve. "Enough. You're being removed from the terminal." No reason, no real explanation, just a snap decision from people who didn't know who he was, and worse, didn't care. Clint stood silently, no fight, no protest, as two more guards arrived to flank him. One of them muttered under his breath, "Wait, that guy looks familiar," but it was too late. They took his bag, turned him toward the exit, and walked him out like he was some kind of threat. Clint didn't say a word. He just walked calmly until the terminal doors closed behind him. To the security team, it was just another routine removal, no paperwork, no headlines, just another non-compliant traveler quietly pushed out. But something about the silence that followed didn't sit right. 10 minutes later, the terminal manager walked in, pressed suit, clipboard, Bluetooth headset in his ear. He stopped mid-stride, sensing something was off. The checkpoint was calm, but then he saw Clint's ID still sitting on the counter. He picked it up, read the name, and froze. Clint Eastwood. He turned to a nearby officer and asked, "Where is he?" She replied casually, "We had to remove him." He wasn't answering fast enough, acting kind of difficult. The manager's voice dropped. "You removed him?" "Yeah," she said. "He got smart, looked shady, probably trying to act tough." "You kicked Clint Eastwood?" The officer gave a nervous laugh, like maybe it was a joke. "Wait, that Clint Eastwood?" "Yes," the manager snapped. "The one who made Gran Torino, $1 Million Baby, Unforgiven. The man's been in more movies than you've had birthdays." Now every officer at the checkpoint was fidgeting. One turned ghost pale. The manager wasn't done. "Tell me you didn't walk him out like some criminal." The officer hesitated. "Well, we didn't know who he was." "That's not the problem," the manager said, holding up the ID. "The problem is how you treated him. You didn't ask. You didn't listen. You didn't even check. This man is 94 years old. He's a veteran. And you tossed him out like a threat because he didn't match your checklist." The junior officer's voice cracked. What should we do?" The manager didn't blink. "You don't do anything. I do. And you better hope he's still out there." Outside, Clint Eastwood stood exactly where they'd left him, still not pacing, not angry, not calling attention, just standing by the curb, his bag by his side, jacket zipped up, quietly watching the planes take off in the distance as the terminal doors opened behind him. He didn't turn around, he didn't need to. The terminal manager came outside slowly, with the same officer who had kicked him out earlier. She looked like she wanted to disappear. The manager walked up and said, "Mr. Eastwood, I need to apologize. There was a big mistake." Clint finally turned around, calm and quiet, and said, "No need." The officer tried to speak, her voice shaking. "We didn't know it was you, sir. We're so sorry." Clint just looked at her, not angry, not yelling, just disappointed, and that hit harder than any words. Then he said one word, "Understood." That was it. No argument, no shouting, no drama, just one simple word that felt heavier than anything else. In that moment, she realized he saw everything and expected nothing better. The manager tried to fix things. "Mr. Eastwood, we'll walk you through security, no lines, no waiting." Clint gave a small nod, not accepting, just acknowledging. The officer tried again. "It wasn't personal, I was just following." Clint raised his hand slightly, not to stop her, but to say don't. She stopped right away, realizing he wasn't mad, he was just deeply disappointed. That hurt more. She wanted him to get mad, to yell, so she could respond or explain, but he gave her nothing, because he knew it wasn't worth it. That one word, "understood," meant, "I expected this," and that's what makes it worse. Back inside, the terminal was silent as they walked. No one said anything, no one made eye contact. The manager tried one last time. "Would you like to wait in the lounge?" Clint replied, "I'm not staying." "We can book another flight," the manager said. Clint just said, "No need," picked up his bag, and walked out. That's when the officer broke down and asked her supervisor, why didn't he yell? After a long pause, the manager finally answered, "Because he didn't have to. That man's been through real battles." This moment was a painful reminder that people often judge before they think. She stood there, frozen and humiliated in a way no punishment could teach. "Will he come back?" she asked quietly. "No," the manager said, "and if he does, it won't be because of us, it'll be in spite of us." Outside, Clint Eastwood got into a waiting black car, the driver instantly recognizing him. As the car pulled away, Clint said nothing. He didn't call his agent, he didn't post online, he didn't complain, he simply looked out the window and moved on. But inside that terminal, no one else moved on. He didn't need to shout or shame them, he let them see themselves, and that was enough. Clint never told the press, never tweeted, never even spoke about it to the driver, but the silence he left behind was louder than any headline. The next morning, there was no news story or viral post, but behind closed doors at the airport's operations office, an internal investigation had already begun. The terminal manager called a quiet meeting, no reporters, no memos, just a blunt breakdown of what happened. He began, "We escorted a 94-year-old U.S. veteran out of this airport without him raising his voice once, and with no idea who he was." The room stayed silent. Then he turned to the officer who'd confronted Clint and asked, "Did you ever stop to ask for clarification?" She stammered, I followed procedure." "No," the manager replied, "you escalated without reason. You made an assumption and dismissed a human being because he didn't fit what you expected." She tried again, "I didn't know it was him." The manager didn't yell, he simply said, "You shouldn't have needed to." That hit harder than any official warning. This wasn't about fame, it was about basic respect. About knowing the difference between having authority and using it with humility. Her hands trembled slightly under the table as the weight of what she'd done sank in. She hadn't just disrespected Clint Eastwood, she disrespected everything he stood for: patience, integrity, and dignity. And the worst part? He never even fought back. He let her reveal her own weakness. 48 hours later, her supervisor quietly pulled her aside, not to fire or suspend her, but to say, "We're relocating you to internal duty for now. No frontline interaction. Indefinitely." "Is this a punishment?" she asked. "No," he replied. "But if a man like that walks through this building again, we're not going to make the same mistake twice. We're not taking the chance again." Inside the airport's leadership meetings, Clint Eastwood's name kept coming up, not as gossip, but as a serious reminder. How many people have we misjudged just because they weren't famous? What if someone had recorded the whole thing? What if Clint had spoken out? That was what scared them most. He didn't. He didn't post, complain, sue, or even say a word. He just walked away and left them alone to face their own actions. And for many, that silence was the harshest punishment of all. Clint could have gone public, named everyone involved, filed lawsuits, or embarrassed the airport, but he didn't. He stayed quiet, and in doing so, made a louder statement than any headline ever could. By day 3, the airport's PR team was nervous. Rumors were spreading among staff. Did you hear who they kicked out? Clint Eastwood. Like the Clint Eastwood. Everyone kept asking, why isn't it all over the news yet? The PR team was preparing for a storm that never came. Because in today's world, everything leaks, except this. No interviews, no footage, no angry posts. Nothing. Clint Eastwood stayed silent, and that silence was more unsettling than a public scandal. In the staff lounge, the officer who confronted him couldn't relax. She kept checking the news, scrolling through social media, waiting for something to explode, but it never did. And that made it worse. Because deep down, she knew Clint wasn't ignoring it, he was letting her sit with it. She had judged a man by his age, his posture, his silence. And that silence had spoken louder than anything she could say in defense. Somewhere else, a senior officer who recognized Clint too late shared a thought with the manager. You know why he didn't speak out? Why? The manager asked. Because he didn't need to. That sentence echoed through the halls. Clint Eastwood had nothing left to prove, not to a badge, a podium, or the public. His silence wasn't weakness, it was strength. It was dignity. He could have told the story on every news channel, gotten public apologies, become a viral moment. But Clint didn't want fame. He stood for principles. And when you live by principle, you don't react to every insult, you just rise above it and outlast it. That's what the officer finally realized as she sat alone in the break room. The man she pushed around didn't need to argue or fight back. He just said one word, walked away, and left her with a memory she'd carry for the rest of her life. Because silence like that isn't weakness, it's a quiet verdict. After the incident, the airport tried to make it right. The director of operations reached out to Clint Eastwood's team multiple times, phone calls, emails, even a formal letter on fancy paper asking for a chance to apologize in person. No response. The head of security offered to deliver a message directly. The officer who'd removed him asked if she could write something, anything, but the answer was always the same, silence. Not out of anger, not for revenge, but because Clint Eastwood understood something simple: some actions don't need a reaction, they just need to be remembered. An apology wouldn't change the moment. A meeting wouldn't erase it. A statement wouldn't fix what was already clear. This wasn't about policy, it was about judgment. And once judgment is passed, guilt doesn't undo it. Clint knew that. That's why he stayed silent. No reply, no comment, because he had already moved on. He didn't need an apology, because he wasn't the one left living with the regret. They were. Every time those officers walked past that checkpoint, every time they saw an older man in a quiet jacket, they'd remember. Remember the man who never yelled but still made them feel something deeper than any argument could. And all he said was one word: understood. If this story made you stop and think, don't forget to subscribe and comment where you're watching from, because sometimes, in a world full of noise, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Thanks for watching.